And we back, and we back. Yeah. Hey, this ain't no intro.
This is the intro.
Yeah, this is the intro.
This is the intro.
It's the entree. Hit that intro with Kanye. I sound like Andre. Tryna turn my baby mama to my fiance. She like music, she from Houston, like Auntie Beyonce. Man, my daughter couldn't have a better mother if she ever.
Give it a fun note.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode.
What's going on? So this is going to be a little bit different. We're going to do something we haven't done in a while, and this is going to be a little bit more free form. But we do have two topics that we're going to touch on. The conversation that we've been having this morning is we really need to go back to doing 2 episodes a week. And the reason for that is because there's just too much going on right now in the world, in life, for us to set an episode and then wait Saturday to get to it and think nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, during that time.
Realistically.
Wait, yeah.
And so while our original plan was to talk about, white supremacy and the people of color that love and support it, and we will touch on those things in this conversation, we need to talk about the Rony.
The Rony.
The Rony.
The Rony. Why is it called the Rony?
Well, what's the real name? Let's say the real name first.
Okay, so it's the coronavirus, but it's labeled
COVID-19.
COVID-19,
right? The reason it's called the Rony is because the JBP boys are idiots, and they got me started using that.
But do you think that's what they currently say in New York?
Yeah, definitely. Oh, son, you got the Rony, son? Nah, but, so we want this to be informative.
Yeah.
But we're also going to give our takes on certain things. So...
And we're going to try not pander to the panic.
Well, we're not. We're not going to at all. And that's something that she said to me initially, right? So, first, we're going to talk about why this is such a big deal. And other people have started addressing this already, so we're not too far. The reason that this is such a big deal, and the reason that that's a question is because we've had Ebola, SARS, bird flu, and all of those other things, right?
Yeah.
And people are saying, well, we swine flu. We made it through those. Those weren't a big deal. We surprised. The old Italian man was saying, I don't know if you guys have seen the video, but he was like, there's no pasta on the shelves. They're empty. This is crazy. It wasn't like this when World War II happened. Mamma mia. Like, he was, you know what I mean? And then somebody was like, they really say Mamma mia in Italy? Yes. But, so the reason this is different is because depending on where you are, one, governments didn't take this serious. The reason the general public is allowed to not take things like this serious is because if your government is doing their job properly and appropriately, then there are systems in play that measure sicknesses around the world, how serious they are. They prepare treatment and testing for people, and they put in countermeasures that keep these things from getting out of control, out of hand, and turning into high death tolls. And what this situation is proving is that a lot of people have been sleeping on the job, and so things that should have been caught and should have been captured are...
Yeah, I think what was really crucial for the coronavirus was time.
Yeah.
And a lot of, it may seem like, just a few weeks, but a few weeks, you have 3-4 people who have the coronavirus leave the country in that small amount of time. That's more countries. It only takes one person.
Right.
And if you wait, governments and countries that make, places that enforce policies wait.
So a perfect example of this is a movie that we watch and enjoy. What we used to call N.G. Caesar, right? Because how she walked.
Oh, yeah.
Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
How does Planet of the Apes happen? The next door neighbor is a pilot, and he gets bit by the monkey and gets the monkey virus, and then he goes to work at the airport, and ping, 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 it travels all over the world. And that's essentially kind of what happened with the Rony, or with COVID-19. The coronavirus, right?
And it really, it kind of sucks for, continents like Asia and continents like Europe, because while here in New Zealand, we're kind of isolated by the ocean.
But
you literally have to travel in by plane. But places like Asia, you can take the train.
Right. But so that brings us. Well, let's jump right into it. Let's jump into the us conversation, right? So the way this immediately affects us here is Pacifica, which is supposed to be today, has been canceled. And this is a big issue for a lot of people, right?
So for those who don't know what Pacifica is, it's we're people, but also it's an event.
It's a festival and an event that happens once a year, and people come from all over the world, from Hawaii, from Australia,
to perform, to do stalls, to
and just really promote and uplift the culture. And it's a time of unity, and it's a big to do here. It's a very big affair for us, right? And it was canceled because of the possibility of the spread of the coronavirus. But
last year it was cancelled.
Right.
Because of the measles.
And so people are already upset about that, right? Because this is 2 years in a row that this big festival for brown people has been canceled and put off, right? And then there are other European festivals in the same time frame this weekend, today even, that haven't been canceled. And there's been a very big cry of outrage to understand the racism in that choice, right? The other part of it is also... I lost my train of thought, so I'll just edit this out. Right? So, for me, this is a double-edged sword, right? Because even though I understand... the other part of it is that there's been a lot of awesomeness in terms of response from the community of people doing pop-up shows. Because to have a stall at Pacifica is extremely expensive. And so people have been having pop-up stalls so that the people who invested all this money and aren't going to get a return don't lose out completely. They can still do sales. The community's coming together, right? But I'm going to tell you what the government's view is and why they targeted specifically Pacifica. The measles hit Samoa in a very hard way. True or false?
Very true.
And there were a lot of infant deaths and a lot of elderly deaths, but more important is the infant deaths. I understand elders play a very important part in our culture, but essentially a generation of Samoa has been cut in half, right? Quite possibly in half, which is going to have long-term effects in the future. And in response to that, there was a very big bashing and outcry against the New Zealand government for not preventing flights and travel and taking their responsibility to the other Pacific Islands more serious and doing more to prevent the measles from getting to New Zealand, to Samoa.
Yeah.
So their view is, in order to prevent that being leveled against them again, that is essentially why they canceled Pacifica. Because if all these people come here and all these communities mix here, and I'm going to take it a step further. So someone was saying last night, NZ Travel, please do not direct European travelers to the South Pacific and to other islands because they can't come to Aotearoa, right?
Yeah.
Because even though it's safer for you guys, you will be exposing our communities to these viruses that we do not have a tolerance for, a resistance to,
or the resources to combat these.
And they will reap and pillage our communities, right?
Very typical of white people.
Right, no, but and that, so that's the point of this, right? So that again is part of why they tried to cancel Pacifica, because we don't have the resistance European originated viruses and sicknesses. So they do more harm to our community than they do to even the European ones that they're currently tearing apart and jumping the death tolls in. And so...
But this is worldwide where a lot of...
It is, but we still have to damage and mitigate what we can here. And so that's how... And New Zealand has been very slow to do testing at the borders, closing of the borders. That's one thing I have to say. Samoa learned from the measles. They learned. As soon as COVID-19 became a conversation, they started shutting down the borders. like getting in and out of Samoa right now. If you're there for a funeral, you're going to be there for a while. Like, you know what I mean? Because they're not playing with this. There's nothing like losing half of your next generation to make you understand the importance of being proactive, right? And so where Samoa has jumped to get ahead of this because they understand what happened to them with the measles, which they're still recovering from, America has done the opposite, right? So,
oh my God, America.
Something that my mother taught me, very young, right, is, do you know what the difference between a good leader and a bad one is?
No.
About 5 heartbeats, right? And this is my issue with a lot of people, right? So I'm going to explain to you what that means. I'll explain to all of you guys. So a good leader makes decisions. They have surrounded themselves with people who can make decisions also and have information, right? It's important to make decisions, and here's why. Because even if you're making the wrong decision, as long as you're making a decision, things can happen as a result. Someone can say, oh no, this didn't work, let's do this. No, we need to do this. And information travels when you're making decisions. Bad leaders sit on information and they hide it and they wait until it turns what we call a molehill into a mountain. This is why communication is so important. This is why this is something that we worked on so heavily because when you don't communicate, especially on a government level, things get worse because no one knows. And so what happened was he was burying information, just like they say, right? He wasn't just sitting on it, he was hiding it because he didn't want it to make it look like he wasn't doing anything or they weren't in control of the situation. So people were offering aid to the U.S. understanding how bad this was going to be in the form of testing kits and all of these other things, and Trump refused them. Because if they started taking these kits and reporting these numbers and finding out how many people were really sick, it was going to look like the problem was his fault. As a result, the situation has become much bigger and more dangerous than it needed to be.
Yeah.
And this is the importance of having the conversation that we were going to have, which is why our elders and parents supporting white supremacists is an issue. Because all of the people, and someone said this and it's true, all of the people who voted for Trump and who didn't participate and didn't do everything they could to fight this are responsible for this situation. Because they put someone in power who was not capable of handling or being a leader, and now things are where they are. So, but moving away from that, so that's just part of why this is more serious, because that was the start of the conversation, right? Why is this so serious?
You know what? What's interesting though is that when Trump put out that kind of, well, I don't even know what you would call it, like he issued that statement that there would be a 30-day ban on all travelers from Europe, aside from the UK. But that, like, I don't think he understands just how much that has impacted the rest of the world, because travel agencies in New Zealand have their customers who are in Europe currently and kind of have like an ongoing tour through America.
But that's the next part of the conversation that we were jumping immediately to. The other reason people are taking this so serious is because it's affecting the economy. And when it affects money, people start to notice and stand up about things that they didn't care about before. So, non-essentials. We have what we call unskilled labor or non-essential jobs, right? That people don't really care about. These are the people who clean. These are the people who do food at the fast food places, right?
Which we care about. Other people
Which we care about, but the government says is non-essential work. The people in the communities that are being hit the hardest are low-income communities. The people who work those non-essential and unskilled jobs come from low-income communities. So these aren't just fast food workers. These are your truck drivers.
Yeah.
So on top of border restriction, goods aren't being moved. Goods aren't being serviced.
From China.
Especially from China. And so because stores aren't operating or opening and people aren't receiving and the docks aren't working, people are starting to understand just how much of their goods and resources
depend on what they've labeled unskilled labor.
But not just unskilled labor, are outsourced from other countries and other places. So people like me, who are hippies and nut jobs, who've been talking about sustainability for so long, people are really, oh shit, well, sustainability is important. Why do all of our resources come from somewhere else?
Yeah.
Right? But even beyond that, okay, well, if we had free healthcare, then we would have... So all of the people who didn't believe in these things, because they weren't affected by them, now they're affected by them, and they want all of these things that they thought were stupid.
It's really, really funny because I saw a tweet that was like, this is exactly right. Was that a lot of the things that they're now fighting for, people who didn't previously give a fuck about it, like, what do you call it? Like paid sick days.
Paid sick leave.
Like annual leave, like a set amount of annual leave that you're entitled to each year. Yeah, like free healthcare, so you can go to the doctors without having to spend $300.
So, we've had this conversation. We talked about it in the last episode. People don't care about things that don't affect them.
Yeah, right? Well, all these things progressives have kind of been fighting for. Bernie Sanders is fighting for.
But so people have been fighting for these things for ages. Right?
Yeah.
And so this will take us into the Italy conversation, but people don't care about things that don't affect them. So now that they're being affected by them, they care. Right? Mm-hmm. And again, why was this unimportant? Because a lot of these things were only affecting lower income communities and lower income families. And now everybody's supposed to have a heart. Everybody's supposed to have sympathy because these communities that weren't being touched before are being touched, right? And a prime example of that is Italy, which we were just fighting about this morning, right? So, what happened was having a disagreement. When Ebola hit Italy, it was largely affecting African communities. And as a result, there was violence and backlash and tons of other negative things towards African people, largely who are refugees in Italy. They were beating women in the street, blaming them for being the cause, right? Shoes on the other foot now. We have the coronavirus, which it appears Africans and people of African descent
are largely untouched,
are largely resistant to. And let's be clear, being resistant to something is not the same as being immune. So we have almost no cases among Africans and African Americans and members of the African diaspora because Africans apparently are very resistant to it, right? Italy's population, its largely European population, is being decimated. Italy has the highest death toll of the coronavirus.
They have the highest number of infections outside of China.
But they also have the highest
exceed China right now.
They exceed China in death tolls and have the highest number. So they've gone from 600 plus deaths to around 900 deaths. And this is over the course of a week. Right? And prime example, so why? Part of the reason Italy has such an issue with refugees is because Italy has been broke for a very long time, right? Their economy has been trashed for a very long time. And so they've only recently started to rebuild it. So they haven't had the money to put a lot of things in place. So they were completely unprepared for this. So it's kind of disrespectful, the difference between the two, right? Because Italy didn't have the economy. They didn't have the funds. They didn't have the resources. America literally had everything they needed.
Yeah.
And did nothing. And a lot of the big outrage that happened just yesterday is the argument that people have been having since the primary started in America, with Bernie Sanders running and Elizabeth Warren running and them wanting to make massive changes to the healthcare system. Where's the money? Where's the money? Where's the money supposed to come from to give all of these poor people free health care? Right? That's the question that everybody's been asking. Whereas yesterday, the stock market started to dip because the economy is taking a hit for all of the reasons we just discussed. Mm-hmm. And $1.5 trillion magically appeared.
Yeah.
And was given to the banks, to the owners of banks, to the CEOs, to the owners of businesses, not the businesses themselves, to pay out to the employees and all of these things, right? It gave the stock market a bump for less than an hour, and then it immediately dropped again.
They just wasted fucking.
And the reason that that's an issue is because it's not just making the rich richer and giving money to people that don't need it and already have it. It wouldn't have taken that much money to get this crisis under control. It wouldn't have taken that much money to start rolling out the CDC and putting all the things in play that people needed to change this around. Mm-hmm. And so I apologize for this number. This is not to be scary, right? But they were looking at projected possible death toll in the U.S. as a result of the coronavirus. So the current projected possible death toll in the U.S. as a result of mismanagement around the COVID situation is 1.5 million. So how did they get those numbers? And just to put this together for people who care. So assuming 40% infection rate, experts say 40 to 70% expected, that's 150 million people infected. And it's 1% mortality rate. Experts predict between 1 and 3%. It's about 1.5 million people dead in the U.S. Okay?
That's quite a shocking number.
It is, especially for us. We were talking about how population and numbers play in here, as a result of things because we're smaller. U.S. has a much bigger population, but that's still a massive amount of people. And so the people that are affected the most, young people and the elderly, people with weak immune systems, right? The important thing to mention as a result of that, there are ways to combat this. Yeah. Yeah? So, other things that are showing the signs of this and how they're combating this, things like the NBA and all major sports being suspended and canceled throughout the states. Part of the way this is being spread is large gatherings.
Yeah, it's through contact.
So here's the issue, right? It's kind of funny in its irony. The information that everybody's being told is please do not attend large gatherings right now. Yeah, that's how this is getting spread. Self-isolation is very important. Please stay home, right? What do people do? Flooding supermarkets and wholesalers and retailers to buy up fighting over resources, right?
Toilet paper.
And so this is kind of a good place to talk about the dangers of hoarding too. Like capitalism. This is a result of capitalism. So what happened was there was enough for everyone. But what people do in emergencies
is they hoard.
But they panic.
Yeah.
They fear and they panic, and then that leads to the hoarding, right? And you hoard for different reasons. Some people hoard because they're like, I'm gonna have no matter what, not thinking about how if they would have done their regular, there would have been enough for everyone. But they don't care about everyone. They are concerned with them, right? And then you have other people who, it's the same thing that happened when Popeyes was out of the spicy chicken sandwich. Not being ridiculous. Yeah. You have people that will buy 20, 30 sandwiches to try and sell the sandwiches. It's the same thing with toilet paper hoarders. You have people that try and capitalize on these situations. Right? But hoarding is very dangerous because, one, it changes the mentality of people. Mm-hmm. People are afraid. So when you hoard, you make them more afraid. And that's why a lot of these situations and altercations have been turning violent, right? Two, on top of that, it's essentially what capitalism in our economy is. You're depleting resources to be the only person who has them, with no intent to share or distribute, right? For self-gain. And people get like animals in those situations, you know?
But I do think, while it's not good to hoard, like, resources, like, at the, like...
Yeah.
I think it is good to kind of gradually get your essentials. I think that should be part
of
your plan.
It's very important to be prepared, right? And that's the thing about this too. A lot of people are learning to understand and take serious things that they've never taken serious.
Yeah.
You know, like, I'm thankful that we don't have to hoard, because I shop, so I do the shopping, but I shop like as a person who's been without. I'm thankful that we're not in a place where we're living paycheck to paycheck, but we've been there, you know? And so our first year of marriage, when we had one baby, shit, we were living on, like, before Shota was born, even after, maybe for a little bit, we were living on like $100 a week for like a while there, you know what I mean? Like, and so when you've been in that situation, you prepare so that you don't have to be in that situation again. And so that's the way I shop, so that we have resources beyond just week to week. But I don't hoard. We don't need to.
Yeah.
It's also not cost effective. It doesn't make sense. But people change up out of fear.
I did want to share, like you said, ways you can kind of prepare yourself, and stuff like that. So I think if you work, I think having a backup plan, not in terms of, but like knowing that maybe because you work in a place where a lot of people gather, having a plan to work remotely. But I know not everyone can do that.
Yeah, not everyone has that option realistically.
So I definitely feel like maybe you should speak to your employer about what plans they have in place in case your workplace is out.
That really depends on your tax bracket. It depends on the type of job that you do.
But I do feel like everyone who employs people, every business, every company at this stage should have a plan in case their workplace becomes incapacitated. So,
how? How for clothing retailers? How for food retailers? How for supermarkets?
So you don't work, but you as the employer need to be like, okay, so we're going to give you 2 weeks extra annual leave because you're going to be out quarantined for those 2 weeks.
Right? So I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm not disagreeing, right? Here's the thing about this, right? So in some countries, the government is giving this money to people themselves, right? Because businesses, you're having a should conversation right now, right? But let's talk about the reality. Most businesses aren't going to do that.
But what I'm saying is you as the the employee should query where you work about what kind of plan they have in place should this happen.
And if they tell you none, then what do you do?
Then you shit out.
Right.
No, well
you're laughing, but that's the point of this conversation.
If they tell you none, then I sincerely...
So, moving on, right? What can you do? Or moving forward, I won't say moving on. What can you do to protect yourselves without having to be reliant on your company for things that they aren't going to care about? Because we have a lot of governments that aren't going to help with this, but some are. And a lot of employers, realistically. So I get that you're frustrated. You are frustrated with my response to that. And my response wasn't to shut you down, right? But...
is it not realistic for people who work to query their employers about what plan they have in place so that they can make up a backup plan for themselves?
You know, so the funny thing is, this is the conversation and the debate that we've been having since like our first season and our first episode, where you've been like, the government needs to be doing this.
I'm not saying that the government needs to be doing things, but if you
that's not what you're saying.
If you literally rely on income every week, is it not... like, is it stupid for you to query your employer? Like, what happens if I can't work these 2 weeks? Then, once you know at the forefront, they don't have a plan, you can make your own plan. Opposed to waiting for something to just happen, then being like, what the fuck am I supposed to do now?
I understand what you're saying. What I'm saying is, you need to put a plan into play immediately, assuming that that's the case. never assume
you're the one
that your company is covering you.
Information.
Right.
I'm saying get the information first before you know.
But it's
you can make other.
That's good. And that's correct. And that's important. That's a step in the process. It's a small step in the process. And what I'm saying is, you need to put plans in play, assuming that's the case already. There are very few jobs, unless you work for a deeply progressive company, which you happen to, where they're putting these plans in place for their employees. And the other thing that I was saying is, again, when it comes to mall jobs, that's not realistic for them.
Any company that cares about their profit will have a plan in place, or will likely have a plan in place to counter what the potential loss of revenue. There are employees that they can't pay. I know they don't likely care about maybe their employees, but if people aren't coming to shop because the thing is closed, they will likely have a plan in place.
Okay.
That's just...
Okay. So, stepping back, in order to gain information for yourself and plan appropriately, it is important to check with your employer and the people you work for to see. But coming away from that, or staying a part of that conversation, actually, it's also important to have these conversations with your family. Something that a lot of people do here in New Zealand, and that only really doomsday preppers do in the States, but which you should be doing if you have a family of any sizes: how prepared are you for an emergency? What are your fresh water? What are your medical things? This is something we've been talking about for ages, because they do this at your work, and so it's something that you definitely wanted to do at home, making sure we have one of our medical needs in one of those big bags, just in case, a go bag for emergencies. Most people don't think about these things because they're so comfortable in everyday life that they don't see these things as realistically becoming an issue. And that's kind of what makes them more dangerous, because when they do happen, nobody's prepared. And so ways to protect yourself is one, being prepared. And that's what we started out. You were talking about ways to combat and protect yourself. So let's move on to the next way. What other ways do you have to be preventative and help yourself from the coronavirus?
I think making sure that, like we talked about, having your essentials, so that if you and your household were quarantined for 2 weeks, you're not left wondering how you're going to get food into the house, The other way to stay healthy that people have been talking about is hygiene. And hygiene is a big part of this conversation, because something that no one realized is people weren't taking hygiene serious, right? But I can go into any men's bathroom anywhere and tell you people weren't taking hygiene serious. A conversation that I've been having for years is at my first law firm. I never used to shake hands, because a lot of our white male attorneys would sit down, use the bathroom, take a dump, and then get up and walk right out and not even wash their hands. And so I know firsthand that a lot of men, pardon me, I don't have the Rony, that a lot of men don't wash their hands. So people are like, oh, you weren't washing your hands? It's actually funny, because that's what scientists are recommending at this stage, is to not, have close contact. So don't shake people's hands when they... and don't... When you greet you, no embraces, no hugging. Kisses for the Islanders.
But I even saw some of our Maori whānau doing a...
Yeah, no hungies.
Yeah, doing a distance hungie, which I thought was really beautiful and dope. He was like, this is what we do in jail. Yeah. I was like, oh, gee, okay, learn something new. But contact, limiting. So, hygiene, again...
just for people who couldn't see that, he was putting his hand to his...
Oh, my hand to my nose, yeah. Hygiene is one of the most effective ways to combat this and really control the spread, outside of isolation as well. And understanding, being rational and reasonable without taking things to extremes.
Practice good, such common sense shit, like when you cough and sneeze, cover your mouth so that you're not... But honestly, yeah.
You say common sense, but we have even debated things that, for us, you used to get offended because I bless myself when other people don't bless. Get offended. Well, you used to get offended because you felt like I was expecting you to say, and you were like, people don't have to say bless you because it's not a thing here, right? Some people don't think to cover their mouths. They've never been told that. Yeah. If you've never, so another thing with us, right? The money. handing money to each other. Germs pass with money. But you didn't know that, for some people, putting money down on the counter instead of handing it per, So we say common sense, but it depends on your environment, because these things aren't important to some people. So if they've never been taught them, and this is the conversation we have, right? Because Europeans, this is a European disease. Well, no, it's a China. It
originated.
Whoa. Let's have that conversation.
The first case came from Wuhan, but we're not sure as to where it originated, but it was first noticed in China. You know what made me say this is a European disease? Because it is taken to the Europeans like fish to water, boy. It has been tearing their communities up. I don't mean to say that with such amusement in my voice. I'm sorry. But the racism has been a very big part of this situation as well. And that's a conversation that you and I were having early on. Because the main people that have been targeted and affected by this are people of Asian descent. Yeah. And they've had the conversation continuously how a lot of Chinese food places and a lot of those type of restaurants are suffering economic struggle right now because people have stopped coming to and stopped supporting their businesses. And while I definitely feel for and understand the community, the conversation that we were having early on is the interesting thing about this is it's always a very touchy conversation because people pretend like it doesn't happen. But there's a lot of racism that comes out of the Asian community to black communities,
but not even just to black, to black and brown people, to other POC, because their stores are in those communities. And now that they are the target of some of the same racism that they've extended, we gotta forget, these people are in need. Now it's all kumbaya and brotherhood, and but
that being said, please don't extend
it's
discrimination towards
unrealistically and unreasonably,
and just how the media has kind of just really targeted like
that narrative. They've kept it up and they've built it up. Even the subtle ways that they do it with pictures of Asian people in front of places were out. But
it's funny because Asians have been wearing surgical masks for ages, years
to prevent the spread, because for them it's cultural custom and respectful to prevent spreading to more people if you have, so racism has played a big part in this virus in many ways, whether we're talking about it largely impacting low-income communities, people targeting Asians around it, or
what's funny though is, well, not funny, but I think we could all look to, and when I say all of us, I meaning like governments can look to Taiwan and just how well that they've contained.
So hats
Taiwan,
off to them.
Singapore,
hats off.
Hong Kong.
They have done so amazing with this. And so the response in Taiwan that we would have hoped to see in other places, they have set up mobile testing facilities where people can just drive through and get their temperature checked.
Oh, that's it. South Korea.
Korea. So they've set up mobile drive-through testing facilities where people can just stop by and get tested and keep moving if they aren't. If they are, they have set up facilities, buildings set to the side where people can get treatment and isolation immediately, and the turnover time and response is within 12 to 24 hours, which is
to date maybe even more than this number, but South Korea have tested more than 200,000 people.
They're having testing at all of the ports, all of the docks, you know what I mean? And so it is very important when your government decides to take they're free or the masks. They've been giving away masks for free.
So Taiwan, right?
They've prevented the government has prevented stores and organizations from raising prices on essential medical needs like the masks as well.
It's funny because Taiwan was hit really heavily by SARS way back when. I think I was young when that happened. But they've learned from it.
Right.
And it's funny because Taiwan is not actually a part of the World Health Organization. They've been kind of excluded. But now, because Taiwan is such like a pillar of just how well they're handling everything, they're kind of the World Health Organization is asking them for advice
Right,
on how to. And Taiwan hit back was like, "Well, you can't ask us for help when you don't want us in your organization. It has to be like a give and
you
take.
You can't have it both ways. Yeah. Input. Yeah. So here's my comment, right, and it's also a little bit of my concern. So my biological mother said something to me once, and it made me resent her for a very long time. I was at a very low point in life, and I was suffering, and her words of wisdom were, "You needed to be humbled." And that really made me angry, because that's not what you want to hear or what you need to hear when you're going through something horrible. Mm-hmm. So while I would never suggest that anyone needed or needs to be humbled, what I will say is you learn a lot from humbling situations. And this, for a lot of people in a lot of countries, is a humbling situation. But here's my fear and here's my concern. Taiwan learned in a positive way, right? And then they did good, healthy things moving forward to prevent things like this from happening again or hitting them poorly. My concern is that people like Duncan Garner and fearmongers are going to use this to try and hurt people moving forward. Mm-hmm. And that's why we say, don't focus on the racism, don't feed into the fear. Because fear of these type of situations is what turns your neighbor into your enemy. Yeah. It's what makes people hate people that they don't even know. Because you brought this to our community, or it came from you. You're using all our resources. You're taking up all our jobs. Mm-hmm. These are the type of arguments that they use to turn people against each other. And I think it's really important that after this or following this up, we still do the white supremacy conversation. Because definitely. That plays a lot into this conversation. Do you have any other input that you'd like to put in on the Rony and what's going on, or things you think people should know?
I think just stay safe. I think in New Zealand right now, this might not be relevant for other countries who've kind of already passed this phase, but we have upcoming flu jabs because we're heading into
flu season.
So I definitely think, while that won't combat the coronavirus, you contacting it, but it'll definitely help in terms of your immunity to symptoms. To
another conversation that's been pretty funny and pretty deep is, so people have said, who's amazingly silent right now that we haven't heard anything from in months? Sure. The anti-vaccination people.
Yeah.
All the anti-vaxxers are nowhere to be seen or heard with the spread of this virus going around.
You know what's funny is because Peter Dutton, he's a significant
anti-vax.
No, he's a politician. He's a racist politician. And he's in Australia. He got the coronavirus.
Yeah, and
I think Australia is actually one of our biggest, like, in terms of traveling.
For me, I think they're a risk because we have a lot of Australians that like to come here, and Australia's getting hit pretty seriously
exactly.
Too by the coronavirus.
They're New Zealand's biggest risk in terms of,
especially because we have a lot of Kiwis that live there now that migrated to there. Like even Tom Hanks has gotten sick in Australia. Yeah. Him and his wife, they're filming a movie there, and they both got the coronavirus from Australia.
Tasmania currently is that little island down in, I don't know where people know.
I come from a land down under.
They are currently quarantine.
And so my main concern is we need to keep the Australians from coming over. No European tourists, no Australians right now. Anyway, and that's the fear and concern for us, because there is very realistically a chance for these things to spread to the smaller islands and the rest of the Pacific by way of Australia.
One case is already confirmed in the Pacific. She's a French Polynesian. Is it Tahiti or is she from French Polynesia? I'm not sure, but she's French, and she got it from France. The bloody French, I tell you.
I believe it was in Tahiti. Yes. So again, we in the Pacifica community are very at risk for being hit by these things in a heavy and serious way. And so it's important to be safe. It's important to talk to your family and work out plans in this situation. I know it's insane to ask us as Pacifica people to not attend large gatherings, but we
because our family are large gatherings.
Yeah, you know, there's like 37 of us in a house, you know, but those are the type of situations that can also potentially be very dangerous because we're bottling people up, and even though we're preventing spread. So an example of this was, you remember the episode of Kings where Plague came and they asked everyone to stay in their homes? And as a result, only 2 people died, but they saved millions of lives. And that's effectively what you're doing when you're quarantined. You're trying to prevent loss to the greater whole. But the reason this affects us a little differently is because when 10 or 15 people live in your home, if one of you is sick, you're effectively taking out an entire family.
I mean, we can even see that now with little runny noses and stuff. How quickly that with
these little monsters,
exactly.
These little monsters. One of them got sick and spread it to the rest of the house. Fortunately, we haven't got sick, but you were very high risk because you sucked the snot out of their noses.
Oh my God! Shut
the
up!
Traditional way, okay, and then be trying to kiss me so I can get sick. You know, parent life. You know, parent
anyway,
life.
That's what they do on Samoa, so don't judge
Pacifica.
me.
But anyway, she said, "Why are you telling?" You know, but the other reason that this is an issue for us in Aotearoa and in Australia as well is because we have a high rate of moisture in our homes. We are more susceptible to mold, and that moist climate in the home can make your home more likely to carry and hold on to different sicknesses. Yeah. And so it's important for us. If you didn't own a dehumidifier before, it's a good time to own a dehumidifier. Auckland, please be safe. Please be rational, because luckily we've been doing pretty good here in Welly, but things have been getting a little out of control in Auckland already, with people mirroring the behavior and pack and save that they have been in other places, you know, with the hoarding and the toilet paper and things like that. We understand buying hand sanitizer, we understand buying toilet tissue. Please buy soap. I'm not even being funny. That's not funny to me. Please buy soap. The hygiene conversation is important, and doing it properly is important. You know what I mean? Now is the time more than ever to pay attention to how you're washing your dishes, how sanitary you're being with your food.
I think one thing that the sign I follow her on Twitter, and she's quite prominent in the scientific community,
yeah.
So she's Dr. Wiles, I can't remember her name, but Susie, Dr. Susie. Mm-hmm. But she said if there's one thing you want to take away from the coronavirus is to flatten the curve, and in terms of flattening the curve is that in New Zealand we currently we have our threshold and resources, like our hospitals can only do so much, can only take so much. So everyone,
shout out. Go ahead, finish. Go ahead.
So everyone doing their part in terms of washing their hands, taking precautions, can slow down the rate of how many
cases are spreading.
Yeah. So one of those spread out over time as opposed to all in one go.
And that's another prime example of the conversation that we were having a little spat about. If you work at a hospital, if you work in healthcare, it's not realistic for you to work from home or take off because you are the front line. And so people expect you to be at work like a firefighter when everybody else is running from the fire, you know? And so we really have to give some praise and thanks to all of our healthcare professionals all over the world who are working in a lot of cases with inadequate equipment, manpower, and all of the things that they need to combat this safely, and still doing their best to save lives and be there for people, because these are the people that we're not thinking about and we're just expecting them to be there. Shout out to all of the firefighters. See, and the reason I say firefighters is because in New York, right, with a city with so much overlap, I've watched firefighters where if it's not a violent call or domestic violence, firefighters have to respond to almost everything. They have to respond to fires. They have to respond to medical EMS emergencies. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm telling you, I remember being on the street and somebody had fainted and a fire truck came. And I was like, why are you guys here? Why is there a fire truck? And they were like, weren't enough ambulances. Yeah. You know, and so we really have to think about the people that don't have a choice to not show up, whose job it is to protect people, and they have had a drain on their resources, and they have been unprepared for a situation that they're now thrust into that's bigger than it needs to be. So thank you to everybody who is not just in healthcare, but who works in a field that's necessary to support taking care of these things, you know? And I think that's something that's really important to call out. So thank you to them. Just the important thing to remember, I think, and to take away is fear and panic never make any situation better. And as long as we stay safe and be rational, we are capable of protecting ourselves and our community. You guys know us, you know me, you know my view. We have to look out for ourselves and look after our people before we expect anybody to do that for us. Whatever help we get from the government or from others is nice, but when you wait, things get worse. And so rather than waiting for somebody to save us, we need to do everything in our power that we can to care for ourselves mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. And I think that's really where I'm at on it. You have anything you want to kick in on the Rony? Just stay safe, guys. We love you very much. Safe. We appreciate you. You know, if you have nothing to do and you're stuck in the house, listen to some of our old episodes. I'm just saying. Let me go back to it. Debate us online, but no. You good?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for being with us, guys. We're not gonna try. We're gonna push out our white supremacy episode this week, and also, we love you very much, and we will talk to you guys soon.